And today we are excited to welcome Anthony Richardson, president of the George Gunn Foundation, who stepped into this role earlier this year. Prior to joining the foundation, Tony served as executive director of the Nord Family Foundation in Amherst. And before his tenure at Nord, he held numerous roles throughout the community, including being elected a council member at large in the city of Lorain, becoming one of the youngest people elected to a citywide seat, serving as the civic and political chair for the Lorain City Schools Levy Committee, which helped the school district pass its first new levy for operating dollars since 1992. Being invited by the Obama administration to attend a working meeting on fiscal cliff at the White House, and being appointed by Ohio's Superintendent of Public Instruction to serve as chair of the Lorain Academic Distress Commission, a joint local and state committee established to turn around the Lorain City School District. Anthony is active in the community. He serves as a board member for Funders Together to End Homelessness, the Center for Effective Philanthropy, and the Corella and Bertram F. Bonner Foundation. Please join me in welcoming Anthony Richardson.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. We really appreciate this time and look forward to an engaging conversation with you all. So I think I'm supposed to start. I thought it would be a Q&A, but I guess I'm supposed to start with just a high-level overview of where we are at the foundation, how we're thinking about our work. And as many of you know, I see a lot of partners here on the call today, or on the Zoom today. And a few years back, our trustees and leadership team and directors had went on a journey around sort of strategic visioning and planning, and articulated this amazing vision around what we believe is a statement, and you can find it on our website. And through that journey, I think the foundation, and again, I wasn't here, but just in conversations and reading the document, the foundation's essentially laid out three overarching priorities: environmental and climate justice, democracy building, and equity and racial justice. And so, as many of you know, working here in Cleveland or spending time here in Cleveland working with the Gunn Foundation in community with us, we do have program areas, environmental climate justice, thriving families and social justice, public education, creative culture and arts, and vibrant neighborhoods and inclusive economy. And it's through those sort of program areas that we work to advance the overarching priorities around climate, democracy building, equity, and racial justice. And it is my hope in my tenure here at the foundation that we continue to advance these priorities, but do so in a way that allows us to really lean into public policy and advocacy. I come from a block of philanthropy that thinks and appreciates responsive grant making and understand the importance of supporting organizations that are downstream, working to advance communities, helping families and people in response to broken systems and how those systems oppress people. But we also understand to really affect change at a large scale, we have to focus on public policy and advocacy work. So you will see the foundation continue to lean into that work, and we're going to do it again across all of our program areas. And so as we think about climate, as you all know, recently, our U.S. Congress passed the Inflation Reduction Act. I'm sorry, I'm a little under the weather today, which was the largest, most comprehensive investment in climate in U.S. history. And so as we think about our work and what does that mean for the Gunn Foundation or philanthropy, but specifically the Gunn Foundation, is how do we leverage this time to work with our partners to infuse technical assistance, such as grant writers, convening, collaborating, connecting, leveraging, and then how are we blending and stacking other federal and state programs to really leverage those public dollars that are here and must be exhausted by 2024. Right. So this gives an opportunity, and that we know that if we want to sustain the world for future generations, we have to reach peak carbon by 2025, which is 5 years earlier than early estimates around 2030. And as many of you know, Growth Opportunity Partners is the only green bank in Ohio and the first lead green bank in the country. And a part of IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, is a $27 billion investment in green banks, right? So we have an enormous opportunity to really build capacity and help advance strategies that are tied to climate action plans, throughout Cleveland, throughout the county, throughout our region, throughout the state of Ohio. And we know that there's been a lot of planning And this is how we're going to sort of really operationalize those plans is through this investment around IRA. And so just to pivot a little bit, because we do see democracy building as a big part of this, right? And, we've engaged around voter registration, education engagement. We fund some statewide partners that in turn create a statewide table and support local sort of democracy building. But one of the things I'm interested in is how do we create infrastructure around democracy and voting and education and engagement year round so that our partners have the resources to organize and mobilize in between grant cycles, and we're not waiting right before elections to try to have an impact on ways that our elected officials, our government can continue to work to preserve our democracy. So when we think about restoring trust and building faith in democracy, peaceful transfers of power, the role of government and people in preserving democracy, we think there's a huge role for foundations, particularly gun, to play in that space. As many of you know, Secretary of State Frank LaRose has just proposed changes to our Constitution here that would eliminate majority rule for citizen-led ballot initiatives and would essentially weaken the power of Ohio citizens. So when we think about what does that mean at a large scale and thinking about our democracy, how can we as a foundation not just sort of build a table to focus on this issue, but also work with our partners across a multi-issue platform or agenda to really advance issues that are important to the Gun Foundation. When we look at potential ballot initiatives coming up here, reproductive health and rights is a huge one, right? Minimum wage, $15 for every worker here in Ohio. And if Secretary of State LaRose is able to sort of advance sort of this opportunity that they see to eliminate majority rule, it'll make it that much more difficult to get those ballot initiatives on the ballot for Ohioans. And last but not least, I know it's all top of mind for us as redistricting, right? I think we voted in unconstitutional maps in like maybe 4 of our last elections. And so when we think about that from just the democracy and thinking about it from an international stage, and if the United States and places like Ohio and other communities in our country that faces threats to democracy, we talk about what's happening in our backyard, but what message are we sending around to the international community around security, around democracy, around organizing? And we haven't found a more, in recorded history, I don't know if there's a more, I don't even say profound, but a more thoughtful and engaging and way around sort of organizing a citizenry than democracy, right? And so it's an experiment. We've never had a perfect democracy. We're still working toward that utopia democracy. But I think if we don't take the right actions and steps right now, this could turn into an apartheid state, right? I mean, this is what's really happening in real time here. So when we think about equity, right, and gender equity and folks, youth, and particularly women, and access for women around reproductive health and rights, I'm really passionate about that issue. Wages, access, leadership, all the inequities that women face is very sort of gender equity is very important to the foundation, as you all know. Racial justice is again very important, and I don't see these things as a hierarchy, right? And I think oftentimes we think that in general, and speaking in community, we think that there's hierarchy in terms of equity, but we know a threat or an equity to anyone is a threat to equity and access for everyone, right? So we got to think about that as we think about racial equity as it applies to education, whether it's pre-K, early childhood, K-12, higher ed, workforce. We thinking about re-engaging workers who may be out of the workforce and they're looking to upskill and reskill. I think that the future of workforce and education is going to be the ability to, or the new literacy, as I call it, is the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. So instead of us working to teach people or potential workers or future workers how to do a job, let's focus on creating critical thinkers, folks who can think interdisciplinary, folks who can hold multiple ideas at once, people who are critical, that have an opinion, that have an analysis, right? Because then you can apply those skills to an array or a set of issues, right? And that's the future of work in my mind if we want to continue to compete at a global level. When we think about home ownership, again, access to education, wealth attainment, health, high quality healthcare, insurance. These are all issues that I think are pertinent and very important as we go into this post-COVID world. COVID has exposed a lot of inequities and gaps. And so what did we learn during this time? How do we continue to bring that collaboration out of this time into our future? How can we continue to work across sectors to think about these issues, whether it's the private sector, government, philanthropy, you know, movement leaders, neighborhood leaders, right? I mean, no one has the answer. And I think the marketplace of ideas is going to only yield ideas that are as formidable or equitable or diverse as the marketplace itself, right? So more equity, more access, the better we are toward, we will be toward sort of achieving some of these things that plague our communities. So with that, we'll turn it over to Q&A. Does that make sense?
That's great, Tony. Thank you so much. So many times when nonprofits, organizations are applying, it is the challenge of general operating grants versus program-specific grants. Can you share your thoughts and insights around general operating grants versus program-specific grants? You are on mute. There you go.
I'm unmuted now. Honestly, I'm a big fan of general operating support. I believe that organizations need the resources and unrestricted dollars to make decisions that they need to make based upon what those needs are to run their shops. And I don't think it's the role of philanthropy to micromanage or handhold or as I call it, play occupy philanthropy. Here at Gunn, we want to retreat. We want to support our partners in the way they want to be best supported. So I'm a huge fan of general operating dollars. We're actually looking at, and I think Gunn, before me getting here and in my former role, we've always supported general operating grants, multi-year grants, and we want to continue to do more of that. We believe our partners have the answers and solutions to their own issues. And so we want to sort of give them that, that freedom and flexibility to do it.
When
Seen a lot of head nods. This must be popular.
There's a lot of folks on this call who are very excited to hear that.
Yeah.
So as you talk about the role of advocacy and policy work, who do you see as potential collaborators in this space, and how do you work to build those collaborations?
It's a great question. There's so many, right? And that's probably a question for my directors. I will punt to them if they're on the Zoom, because there's so many. I don't want to name or single anyone out, just being respectful and responsible to those relationships that we have. But I just at a high level, I see those relationships being, like I mentioned earlier, nonpartisan, apolitical, but really being folks that are in private sector. I mean, I'm working right now at a table around business leaders and engaging them around democracy building, right? These aren't nonprofits, this isn't government, right? And so wherever those allies lie is where we want to be and engage, right? So I can't specifically name an organization, but I think it's tied to allyship, similar goals and values. And then those partners sort of find their ways to us. And just to also to name, partnership doesn't always mean a grant, right? There's so much that happens beyond the grant. And I think funders play a unique role in connecting and convening and educating and sharing practice, right? So while I know that there is a toolbox and that sometimes for our partners, the more preferred tool is the grant, but I want you all to know that foundations, in addition to grant making, also can leverage a myriad of other resources for our partners. Introductions to leadership, right? So there's a lot there.
Can you share some insights around the accessibility of program directors at the Gunn Foundation to be able to discuss initiatives that organizations are considering applying for?
Absolutely. So, I think it's always important to go to our website and just sort of look at, and we're going to be working to clarify and explicitly name like the strategies within those program areas, so that when partners or prospective partners come, they can get a sense of who they need to speak to. I was just speaking with our new director of strategy around access points, right? So it's not just, can I get to a program director to have a conversation, but what are the mediums that I can use, right? Can I send a video? Can I have a conversation via phone? Can I show up to your office? Can we do Zoom? But then can I upload a video, right? Like and share, right? So when we think about equity and true access, we need to be very thoughtful around what access looked like, not just who has access, right? So we're going to be working on it internally as well. And I'm excited about that because I think different people have different sort of ways of engaging or ability to engage. And so we want to be thoughtful that we here internally can respond to how our partners or prospective partners, their choice of medium and connectivity.
Can you share thoughts around the sustainability of the nonprofit landscape in Cleveland, and how might that influence your funding priorities?
You got it. That's a great question. And we're watching this COVID cliff, right? We see expiring federal programs coming. I'm talking to the mayor. We're talking to different folks, whoever will listen. We need to start really identifying some of those best practices, things that we've learned, investments we've made with federal dollars so that we can continue those programs and projects beyond 2024, right? Because we know that fiscal cliff is coming. And so the landscape we know isn't sustainable, right? And so the question becomes, one of my colleagues would appreciate this. One of the things that we could do, I think, as funders is really think about endowments and how are we building endowments. I'm not thinking, when I say sustainable, I'm not thinking 5, I'm thinking 50 years from now, right? When the same organizations are going to foundations for $50,000, $100,000, right? If you go back 20 years and you made a different type of investment in that organization, imagine what that does for them, right? And so if we really are thinking about like these independent organizations, independent communities that are not dependent on philanthropy, then we got to rethink how we do grant making, right? Make those larger investments multi-year and invest in ways that allow them to create that sustainability. And I think this opportunity that we have before us is we're going to have to really think about where are those public dollars, even private philanthropy. I mean, there's a cash event that happens. Some folks get a huge sort of tax break. These foundations are created, but these are public dollars, right? These are another iteration of public dollars. And so how do we stack and blend these public dollars with what's happening at City Hall, County Council, other foundations, business, right? And so there are tables that need to be created that are multifaceted, multi-dimensional, and bring folks across different sectors to think about investment in a way that's different than we have. We can't move forward in silos. And then you're going to see more no's from county and sort of municipal government in the next couple of years, right? There's all these sort of ARPA dockets, COVID that money's going away. So we got to rethink like how we're going to address issues that we've been able to address during the pandemic that we just won't have the funds post-pandemic.
Can you share a little bit about the footprint of funding for the Gun Foundation and if you are looking to expand beyond that footprint in the near future?
Yeah, so I think we need to clarify our footprint because we do grant making all across the country, right? I mean, primarily it's here in Cleveland, but some of our policy and advocacy work is national, right? And then there's some of our policy and statewide work that's also statewide, and they don't necessarily. So when we look at Cleveland proper, and you're looking to sort of get funding to do work in Cleveland, then yes, that counts as a Cleveland grantee partner because the work is concentrated in Cleveland. Or if you're an organization outside of Cleveland that's looking to do work in Cleveland, right? Or if you're in Cleveland and you're looking to do work that would impact Cleveland, right? And I think somewhere out in the country, we get grants from all over the country. Again, we got to be more explicit and more clear about like, and even within the different program areas, which program areas are more open work, like climate, right? That's like global, right? So, I mean, it's not about where you are. It's about like, what are the goals? How do they align? And how do we move it forward?
As you look at the foundation and where it's headed, what is one of the greatest challenges you see for the foundation, and how are you looking to overcome that?
I think the greatest challenge is not just for the foundation. I think it's for philanthropy in general, right? I think when we think about organized philanthropy, we think about these foundations, they're sort of dinosaurs, right? I mean, we see huge wealth being created where individuals probably don't want to work with boards. They want to move more quickly. They want to give larger sums of money to organizations. They're very value driven, right? And they want to make huge impact now. They don't want to wait. And so for foundations like the gun foundations of the world, more organized and traditional, for us to be able to be relevant in this time. And when I say relevant, it doesn't mean to outspend people, right? But it means to really advance our work. We have to think internally and operationally and through our governance structure, what will allow us to get to a point where we have a rolling grant award acceptance, right? Where we get to our board meetings and it's just ratifications at that point, because we need to be quick, we need to be nimble, we need to be responsive, right? And our existing structures don't allow us to do that. So when we talk about trust, relationships with our boards, we just got to rethink fundamentally what's our value add in community, because things happen so quickly and the world does not exist around our grant cycles, right? So we have to be responsive to what's happening. It's not for you all in community to respond to us. We need to respond to what's happening in your backyard. And that's something that I see I will get done here during my tenure at the foundation.
So Tony, in your role on the board for the Center for Effective Philanthropy, you've had the chance to witness and discuss the very large gifts being made by Mackenzie Scott and now locally.
Yeah.
What effect do you see these large grants having on philanthropy and on nonprofits?
I think you're going to see more for nonprofits. It's great, unrestricted dollars to really advance your mission and work. I think about our partners that I see, so many of you that I've known over the years, and think about not having to think about fundraising, right? And what that will allow you to focus on and able to do, right? So I think that, and it's showing that. Also, I think is going to other sort of wealthy individuals, not just here nationally at the Center for Effective Philanthropy. We're expanding our footprint globally, and so we're trying to take these practices and share. Like we see like huge wealth being generated. So we're going to see more of Mackenzie Scott sort of investments. But what are we learning from that, right? And what are the drawbacks, if any, right? And how do we share and communicate that? But I do love the general operating support. That is a huge thumbs up for that. Some of the grant partners may not be aligned, but that's another story for another day.
So you are among a handful of new leaders who have taken the helm following some very long-term leaders. How has it been to step into your role? And what do you think about this new wave of leadership and what this means for Cleveland?
I played sports growing up and in college. And one of the things that I appreciate was I appreciate coaching. I appreciate folks who've come before me. I was a backup point guard before I started as a sophomore on varsity. Then in college was a freshman that backed and then came in. But I would go back to the former starters and ask them about things. Or I find sometimes in our roles and sort of when we become adults, it's about ego. It's like, you got to move on. And so it's like my turn. But it's like, this person's been here for 20 years. Like, I want to know what kept him here for 20 years, right? I want to learn from that person. That's wisdom. And I think sometimes we get into these opportunities and we think that that's an indictment on our leadership, right? And I have anecdotal story. If you watch basketball, I'm a big basketball fan. Is Kobe Bryant, the late Kobe Bryant, was sitting down with Magic Johnson. He was thinking about he wanted to leave the Lakers, and Magic Johnson told him, "It's not the name on the back of your jersey, it's the name on your front of your jersey," right? And to me, that was so profound because it wasn't about you. And just because there's Magic Johnson and all these great Lakers hanging up in the rafters, that doesn't mean you can't be up there. That doesn't mean you can't be great. And you don't need to diminish them for your greatness to be, heralded or respected, right? And so when I think about that, that's ego. And I think for folks who are coming into these roles that are coming behind longstanding leaders, like we don't need to push them to the side, right? Obviously, we don't want to sort of, we want them to feel like we're not overburdening them or taking up too much of their time. But Dave Abb and I have a great relationship. I can call him. He just emailed me today. He never tells me how to do his job, his job, right? For Forwarding and Slip. He never tells me how to do my job. He has never done that. He's been accessible. He's been supportive. He's been my biggest cheerleader. And I'm fortunate to be in a role to advance and continue what he established and helped set up, right? So I think more folks that are sort of my peers, I share that with them to let them know that, your leadership or their leadership is an indictment on yours. And you're all part of a continuum, right? And you have this moment in time. And so how do you advance that, right? And if advancing that means that being in thought partnership with that person, then you need to be in thought partnership with that person because they gave a lot to the organizations. They cared about the organization. And so you want people around you that care about the things you care about. That's how you get things done.
So in your first few months, what has surprised you with your work so far?
Biggest surprise. So I know a lot of the folks that have been here. It's like the team, like honestly, like so smart, so engaging, so thoughtful, so supportive. And I would not be sitting here today in this sort of level of comfort without them, right? I mean, they really showed me the ropes, right? And I always say, if you listen to people, they'll let you know what your job is, right? And so they've let me know what my job is on so many different occasions. So I think I got that part down. But it's been great. It's been great. That's been my biggest surprise, actually, is like just how much capacity, and we're a slim and lean and mighty team, and just how thoughtful they are, and really invested in how much they care about the work. To me, is something that not necessarily surprising, but it was it was inspiring, right?
So as you laid out the vision for the Gun Foundation, what are some of those first steps that you are looking to take to really bring that vision to life?
We've already taken steps, some steps, right? Because I've been here almost a year now. But in terms of like really unlocking the general operating, really thinking about quicker access. So for example, when I came to the foundation, one of the things I did in my first meetings was I asked the trustee to increase our discretionary grant amount, right? Because I saw that we were really bogged down by smaller grants. And we know all these partners, we trust our leaders. Let's just move these grants very quickly. I think we may have quadrupled. I think we increased it by 5 times the amount, right? So now when we get to the board meeting, like we have less grants to talk about, grants can get out quicker, our directors have less write-ups. And so it also helped with capacity in terms of like time to focus on other things and be more generative and more sort of reflective and think and ideate, as opposed to like just turning over grants. We want to do more of that. We want to get to a point, like I said, where we're just responding in real time to partners at a high level in advance of board meetings. I think we've done so much internally around sort of just like, we've done a lot, right? But I think what's relevant to our partners is this idea, and all the folks here, is this idea of us being even more responsive and being able to address and sort of deliver resources to you quicker. And we've started that, and we'll continue. I'm sorry, I'm a little under the weather today. I wanted to name that again. I'm not feeling good, but I couldn't miss this. So here we are.
Oh, Tony, you are doing great.
Oh,
so
man.
For those of us who are on the call, how can we best support the work of the Gun Foundation and look to partner as you act on this vision moving forward?
I think to continue to do the work that you do, right? I think the work of our nonprofit leaders and our leaders here in public space is yeoman's work. Obviously you're not in it for money, right? You all care about the work that you do. And I just want to, tip my hat to you all. And especially coming through the pandemic, being in the pandemic, on our way out, you all hanging in there, right? And we didn't think about like, how are we supporting the supporter, right? Because you are also responsible for community. So how are we thinking about sector resilience, leadership resilience? There's been huge turnover at nonprofits because of some of the stress. And so when we think about wellness, right, how can our foundation be thinking about ways to support sabbaticals for our nonprofit leaders, right? Allow them to take time off and then sort of train and promote emerging leaders. That's something that we grapple with, right? Because we know that there are people, right? And there's also like something to be said around like just fatigue, right? Emotional fatigue. You all are on the front lines, never stop working. And so we want you all to sort of continue to work. And so when we think about strengthening the sector, which is another place I think we want to get to at some point here at Gun, sector resilience, I want you to know we're thinking about you, right? And that we want to sort of make sure you have what you need to continue to advance the work of your organization. You can't do it without good health, right? Balance.
Well, Tony, we are so thankful for you joining us today, especially feeling a little under the weather. Thank you so much for your leadership and the work that you all are doing. And CLC is also very thankful for the support of the Gun Foundation for our work.